Kashimo, I gotta be real with you, dog. You may not scale anywhere. What's up, guys? All Punter here, and here we are to do a quick breakdown and discussion to determine whether or not Hajimekashimo scales. Hajimekashimo scales anywhere near, even to the heel, the licks, the tails of Ryomen Sukuna, the king of curses. This video shall determine whether or not Kashimo scales at all, whether that be in base, whether it be in Phantom Beast Air, but whether that be at all. We need to determine whether or not Kashimo even begins to reach the base of the pinnacle of the mountain known as Ryomen Sukuna. So let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into it. Ending me. Ready. 3, 2, 1, go. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. And a fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, Kashimo Hajime did happen to... That man, he just ain't living. He just ain't living no more. That man cooked. He is chefed up in a matter of 2 chapters. But of course, a lot can happen in 2 chapters, right? A lot can happen. So maybe Kashimo Hajime does deserve to bear the title of the strongest of his own era. Maybe Kashimo Hajime can reach even the toes of Ryomen Sukuna and Satoru Gojo. Maybe Kashimo Hajime can be hailed as one of the mightiest, alongside the 2 deities, Jujutsu Kaisen in Gojo Satoru and Ryomen Sukuna. So let's actually do a quick review of Kashimo's battle and see if he actually does properly scale anywhere to the king of curses, Ryomen Sukuna. So, here's the thing, right? In my opinion, Kashimo's kind of weird to scale. And it's for this main reason. Unfortunately, Kashimo's only 3 battles in the entire narrative. This fellow right here only has 3 fights. And unfortunately, all of those fights kind of lead him nebulously nowhere, just based on how they work and the nebulous nature of how some of these interactions go. For his first major on-screen battle, it is against Filth. Disgusting, absolute waste of space. I don't even want to say its name, Panda. But the thing with Panda is, he's fodder. He's fodder. His sister's feetless. His brother's feetless. Beat Makamaro. But brother random. Panda form whack. Everything whack about Panda. Panda scales Kashimo nowhere. Oh, he's above he was supposed to be recommended for grade 1, but Panda's fodder. He's trash. He's garbage. He's actually just a literal waste of space, ink, time, and memory. If I could delete Panda from the series, man, I'd Control A, Control P. I guess that's gonna select all the Panda panels and just delete them all. Straight up. But with that being the case, unfort, that doesn't scale Kashimo anywhere. And for the next major battle he has against Hikari kind of scales nowhere too. Especially considering he is so nebulous, and we don't fully, or at least no one can come to agreement on how bulky or how strong Hikari actually is. Because now it just seems no one agrees he's stronger than Yuta. Not a single soul. Despite Yuta saying it, now it seems like everyone's on the Maki hype train for this one statement in particular, and saying that, nah, Yuta's lying. So Hikari just scales randomly beneath Yuta and randomly above post-Demon God Yuji. We don't know if Jackpot gives him increase in stats or anything like that. We got nothing. And that's the only other fight that Kashimo really has, except for this one right here that we're here to cover against Ryomen Sukuna. But here's the thing with this battle. It kind of... This battle's awful for Kashimo for multiple reasons, but let's actually break it down bit by bit. So the first thing we do have to scale is base Kashimo, admittedly. Base Kashimo is the first one that goes up against Ryomen Sukuna. And we get one pretty solid feat here without the context. So we see Ryomen Sukuna whip up Kamutoke. He's like, oh, shoot! Let me drop it on him. And he drops it on him. The numerous lightning bolts of Kamutoke strike at Hajimekashimo, and he's fine. Well, mostly fine. This is actually kind of embarrassing for him in retrospect, because remember, the characteristics of Kashimo's cursed energy provide resistance to electricity. So, resistance. Meaning that Kamutoke, a weapon imbued with a cursed technique, a cursed tool, if you will, it was actually able to damage him, but just not enough that it did any real serious damage. So I would like to give this as a solid feat to Kashimo, right? Because this Kamutoke is presumably a recreation of the original Kamutoke, which was taking out prime Heian era sorcerer. Sukuna was just swinging that bad boy around and lightning was dropping left and right, but he has a resistance to electricity, a pretty strong one at that. And thusly, it's kind of hard to scale Kashimo anywhere off of this, especially since Kamutoki itself is unfortunately relatively featless. You would have a better feat if Kashimo hypothetically scaled to any of Sukuna's actual curse techniques, not just Kamutoki. We have no idea how much the lightning bolts, despite how jacked and juicy they are, this is bigger than any lightning bolt that Kashimo summons and is almost the same size as the Nue bolts. We have no idea about the potency of these relative to Sukuna's actual attacks, so it's hard to say that Kashimo skills a Sukuna off this, once again due to the fact that this is Sukuna's weapon, not necessarily Sukuna himself, and also he has a resistance to electricity. So unfortunately, base Kashimo yet to receive any scaling to Sukuna himself. But maybe it gets better, right? Maybe it gets better for base Kashimo. Maybe he actually has something so he can scale him in Akari somewhere. Doesn't get better, because as we see here, after a little bit of a yap session, and as a humble yapper myself, I understand the importance of the yap session, Kashimo Hajime lunges in. And we see he goes in. He just like me, for real. He's like, all right, let's do this. And he immediately goes to swing on Sukuna. But let me give you some context for why this is so embarrassing for base Kashimo, and by proxy, Hakari, and by proxy, anyone who scales beneath those people. This Sukuna is just about the weakest we've seen him. Well, maybe not literally. Who knows? Maybe this Sukuna is still fully capable of one tap. But then again, he one-shots Satoru Gojo. That's the weird thing about this. He's a nightmare. But then again, that's due to hacks and not necessarily overall power. But in terms of physicals, the man's missing a hand. He's burnt to all belief. He can't even RCT no more. This man's so low on juice, presumably, that he's darn near far. Look at the scratches, beat up scratches, arm missing, pants torn up. He doesn't even have feet no more. There's charred nubs. This man, in terms of physical, should be garbage. And now, of course, there are always contentions on whether or not the base physical body actually matters for reinforcement or not. But if you want to stack that extra on top and assume that this is just Megumi's body, this is Megumi's body being fueled by the bare minimum of Sukuna's cursed energy and a full power, entirely fresh. I've been sitting on the sidelines watching the battle the entire time. Kashimo lunges in with absolute insane determination, lunges in and goes to slam his staff straight on the king. It does nothing. Sukuna bats him away like a child. Nothing. You want to know what the sad thing is? This is pretty much the end of base Kashimo versus Omega fatigued 20-finger Maguna. Just that's it. This one interaction is the only interaction that they have. And with that, it's basically impossible to scale Kashimo. And here's the thing, right? As we're going to get into, scaling to any version of Sukuna, no matter how damaged, no matter how weak, no matter how whatever, still good. But the fact that base Kashimo, a character who on his own was perceived to be pretty powerful within the series, even before Phantom Beast Amber, Kashimo was pretty highly consistently believed to be a top 10-ish character just to scaling to Akari and Akari statements, especially once Akari started getting more statements. A lot of people still put Akari above Maki because, he's considered the one that Gojo is hey, unless I'm weaker than you or Yuta, don't come out here, and that doesn't include Maki. And then if you obviously go with Maki equals Toji, yada, yada, yada. It pretty much put Kashimo, who was... Go reread Hikari versus Kashimo. I'll do a battle breakdown on that one day too. But go reread Hikari versus Kashimo. If you don't remember, Kashimo was dominating that entire fight. Hikari was only alive because of his immortality. But realistically, Kashimo was dominating the entire fight. And by the end of the battle, took basically no damage. He had a few drips from his nostrils and a mark on his cheek. That's the most damage that Hikari took from a swinging, kicking, brawling jackpot Hikari. So, obviously, Kashimo's believed to be pretty darn powerful here. Darn near super mighty. So, for him to just have this one sad behind interaction with the most fatigued version of Sukuna that we've seen in the entire series, once again, feet nubs, no hand, beat up to all belief, just experiencing the freshness off of Hollow Purple, and an extensive, and I mean extensive battle with Goto Satoru, the strongest sorcerer of the modern day, for base Kashimo to do absolutely nothing to him. Embarrassing. I mean, I guess the only thing, the only thing you can say for base Kashimo is that he doesn't get perception blitzed, and Sukuna considers him worthy of being blocked. He doesn't just Kenpachi him and just let Kashimo's staff just bounce off of him or like, I was about to say something horrible, hold against his body or anything like that. He very specifically knocks Kashimo away. But like, we see that Sukuna, he's just a playful, silly guy. He may have just knocked Kashimo away just to disrespect him. He just, boom, bounces it off. So it's hard to say anything here. I guess Kashimo's arm doesn't get broken when Sukuna bats him away. But even then, look at this. It appears like Sukuna just moves his arm to block, and then he dances backwards a little bit. So I guess maybe the most generous argument you can make for base Kashimo when comparing him to 20-finger Omega Fatigue, missing an arm. Okay, he does actually have feet, but missing an arm, missing a hand. Well, he does have both arms, but missing a hand. Omega Fatigue Sukuna is that Sukuna considered him worthy of blocking and danced away from some of his attacks. That's about it. And ultimately, it's kind of no scaling at all. Base Kashimo can't even be in the discussion to scale to this Sukuna. Does base Kashimo scale to any previous variations of Sukuna? It's kind of up in the air. Once again, we don't exactly know what the Sukuna fingers do. We also don't know how much stronger this Sukuna is, despite being Omega Fatigue in comparison to previous versions of the Sukuna. Is just because the Sukuna is at 20 fingers, he's stronger than any variation of 15 finger we've seen. He's stronger than 10 finger. 10 through 1. We have no clue. So it's kind of hard to argue Kashimo scales. You'd have to start doing indirect things. You'd have to start like looping backwards and intertwining statements. Like you'd have to go with, oh, well, you know, base Yuta, at least that's all Yuji saw. Base Yuta thinks 15 finger would be a good match for Yuta, but Yuta would hypothetically win that. So I guess you say base Yuta is a 15 finger, and then you take Yuta's statement at face value. Once again, this is just straight face value, not being skeptical at all of the statements. Yuta Sasakari is stronger than him. In Jackpot, Akari and Jackpot, it's, I don't want to say dominated, but Kashimo does control that entire battle, so Kashimo would scale above 15 finger, even in base. That's kind of the only argument you can make, but there's a bunch of issues with that. Like, a bunch of issues with that. So I think it's kind of hard to argue that Kashimo scales to Sukuna at all. Especially not 20 finger, considering how embarrassing his performance is in base. But luckily enough, we ain't really here to talk about base Kashimo. I don't think I need to convince you that base Kashimo does not scale to any variation of Sukuna. If there's anything I need to convince you about, it was this one. Technique release, Mythical Beast Amber. Oh, I kind of prefer Phantom Beast, but this is the official translation. So, Mythical Beast Amber Kashimo. Now, this is where we start getting jacked and juicy, y'all. For a couple reasons. Number one, we see Kashimo, due to his massive, well, he gets an increase in speed for one. This is confirmed to be a part of his transformation, but with this increase in speed, he does actually manage to tag this Omega Fatigue 20-finger Sukuna. So boom, boom, he just wombo combos him. Nice, juicy, scrumdiddlyumptious. However, it's the only thing about this two-piece that he gives Sukuna, with no drink, admittedly, like, well, Kashimo, at least be a little bit polite, give him a bev or something. We do get to see these are little tiny droplets of something, but I'm not sure if these count as juice. And you know what juice I'm talking about. I'm talking about that good old life juice. I have no idea if these are life juice. But for Kashimo's sake, I'm going to assume that they are. The reason I'm only so questioning of this is because, like, look at where the marks are positioned here on Sukuna's face. And then look here. It seems like maybe these could be Sukuna just, like, having previous damage. But no, this presumably is Mythical Phantom Beast. I try to fuse the two names. Mythical Beast Amber Kashimo actually damaging 20-finger Sukuna. However, the thing is, I mean, this got like low-end damage. Like, it's very similar to the damage that Maki does against 15-finger Sukuna when she just glasses him across the face. And we see a few life droplets fall off of him then. Am I saying that Mythical Phantom Beast Amber Kashimo is as strong as Maki? No, I presume that this Sukuna is more durable. Maybe, most likely, even with, like, his weakened state, he's most likely more durable than his 15-finger self, even though that 15-finger was fully fresh and his physicals weren't nerfed. But still, this is still a very impressive feat for Kashimo. This automatically kind of gives him some sort of leeway. He's able to leap up against this 20-finger Sukuna and then do some damage to him. However, this is where it kind of gets weirdly contentious. Because when you see this, Sukuna's very clearly surprised. Kashimo clearly gets a massive boost in speed, then he lands the double piece, the wombo combo, the two-piece, if you will. And then Kashimo reels back, he goes whoosh, and then he pull, and he spits full force at Sukuna. Of course he's screaming, but like I just like to imagine that Kashimo hawked an electric loogie, and he spits directly in Sukuna's face. Now this is a little bit weird. This is obviously one of Kashimo's applications of his curse technique. This should be Kashimo at 100% of his potential. This should be 100% Loogie, not no 20% Loogie that Kashimo's been fighting at for the entire series, considering Gojo says a wielder of a curse technique's most of their potential is kind of locked by their curse technique, like 80% of it. So Kashimo should be at 100% here, and he directly at Sukuna, but Sukuna presumably takes no damage, which is kind of embarrassing. Like, he takes absolutely no damage at all. And once again, I gotta remind you, this is, like, super weak in Sukuna. This Sukuna is so weak, he can't even RCT. This is a Sukuna that's post the Satoru Gojo. This is a Sukuna that's so down atrocious and so down bad that he's out here shaking and ugly and googly and everywhere. Like, bro is in agony. And what does he react to one of Kashimo's Loogies with? Well, that was loud. So essentially it did nothing. Like, don't get me wrong, I guess maybe it did some like ear damage, but like I'm not sure if I'm scaling ear damage as 20 finger, but that's fine, right? You know what I mean? Like, Kashimo clearly is able to tag this full power Sukuna, right? Like, well, not full power obviously, but this super fatigue Sukuna, right? Like he gets him with the 2-piece here, and that 2-piece must mean he directly scales, right? Kinda, sorta. Because here's where it gets confusing. So Kashimo, after leaping up in speed and catching Sukuna off guard here, Sukuna, who should have some variation of precog, we see he's very similar to the Heavenly Restriction users, where he's able to like read the environment very, very well. He's able to like react to people like Satoru Gojo and stuff like that. He gets caught off guard here, and I kind of hate to say it, but he's still relative. I was messing with you, though. I was messing with you. Because we do get to see, while Sukuna is able to respond to one of Kashimo's irradiated electricity blasts, Kashimo hitting him with another scream does catch Sukuna off guard enough that he needs to block. Oh, he's missing an eye, by the way. How did I forget he's missing an eye? But he is forced to block. He raises Kamutoke to guard, but then Kashimo slobber knocks him across the face once again, and does actually send him flying. So it's pretty impossible to argue that Phantom Beast Amber Kashimo doesn't scale to this 20-finger Sukuna. And notably, the major attacks that don't do too much damage are regular punches and then like screams. But it appears that Sukuna's worried enough about these irradiated electricity blasts that he does not want to get hit by them. You'll see this as a pattern once we hop to True Form Sukuna versus Kashimo as well. But he does not want to get hit by these blasts. And then we see that Kashimo does land another good hit. This is a good enough hit that it knocks Sukuna backwards. And Sukuna does drop a pretty considerable amount of juice here. So Phantom Beast Amber Kashimo does definitively scale to this super weak variation of Sukuna. Now, this is where it gets weird. How strong is this Sukuna? Because, like, you could say this Sukuna is strong enough to one-shot Satoru Gojo. Because it did, right? But that was mainly a hacks thing. In terms of physicals and how much cursed energy reinforcement he has and how bulky he is right now, presumably he still should be the most bulky character in the series, unless you think bulk correlates directly to how much cursed energy one has. And if you can't even have enough to RCT, then maybe he doesn't actually have that much bulk right now, and maybe this isn't too impressive. But regardless, wherever you put this super omega fatigued 20-finger Sukuna, he does scale to him directly. In fact, you can pretty solidly make the argument that Phantom Beast Amber Kashimo, especially before he fully achieves his state that we'll see in next chapter, yeah, he pretty definitively scales to, if not directly above, this Sukuna. So wherever you put this Sukuna, in terms of things like reaction speed, in terms of perception speed, in terms of durability, Kashimo would scale to, if not above that, which is very, very good. And honestly, it does put Phantom Beast Amber Kashimo above a pretty decent chunk of the verse. This Sukuna would run ramshot, at least in my opinion. Though, of course, I may do a little separate scale on Sukuna himself. And we see that Kashimo goes in for a bolt. Now, these bolts have been seemingly very, very lethal. Like, extremely lethal. Like, tear through people with infinite curse energy lethal. But once again, Hakari's bulk is questionable, to say the very least. It should be above, like, post-Shibuya Demon God Yuji when fully healed. That's about it. Like, we have no idea if the infinite curse energy actually gives him any sort of durability buff. So, with that being the case, Kashimo's bolt lunging in here, we don't know. We don't know. Maybe if Sukuna didn't incarnate here, it would have done lethal damage. We just don't know, unfortunately. Because then we get to True Form Sukuna. And Y'all, I've been trying to glaze him. I love Kashimo. Kashimo's my boy. He's my dog. But let's hop into chapter 238 and talk about why it's very, very likely that Kashimo doesn't scale Sukuna at all. So let's hop into it. Oh shoot, we got to the wrong part of the chapter. Let's go back in time for a minute and let's talk about the beauty of the king as we see Hajime. He looks upon perfection. And we see he opens up the third eye. Presumably this is the most completed variation of Kashimo. Normally we don't see him evolve any further past this point. The most further evolution we see with Mythical Beast Amber comes from him regenerating a hand after a piece of it gets cut off, but there's a whole bunch of context behind that. So with this being the case, 20-finger Sukuna is fully incarnated. Do we fully understand how this works? Or how much happened with this? Not necessarily. It hasn't actually been properly clarified. At the end of 237, it's very specifically noted that Sukuna has a way to repair flesh only once, besides reverse curse technique. He can do so by resuming the transformation as a curse taking fleshly form, which he had purposely interrupted before. Now, this is admittedly official translations, but like Sukuna isn't a curse, legally speaking. He's just a dude that evolved. He's kind of like, he's in the Tengen territory. Tengen didn't actually become a curse. He kind of just fell under curse spirit manipulation criteria due to the vagueness of Tengen evolving past humanity. And it appears that if humans evolve enough, they just turn into curses. But like, notably, Sukuna does have flesh. He does use RCT. He's not a curse. If a curse were to try and use RCT on itself, it would literally explode. So ignore this part. The main thing to focus on is that his flesh was repaired. So this Sukuna that we see right here should be fully back to max heal. All his muscles should be back to normal. His physical should be back. Everything should be normal. The only thing that may not be normal is his cursed energy reserves, considering only his flesh is going to be repaired. So this Sukuna, it's going to be embarrassing if it is the case, this Sukuna should still reasonably be Omega fatigued from the Gojo Satoru battle after expending loads upon loads of cursed energy. How much that fatigue matters and how much of that fatigue is a real thing is questionable, especially considering what we see later on in chapters after the Kashimo fight. But with it being the case, either it looks bad for Kashimo or it looks worse for Kashimo, because we see that Kashimo immediately begins the glaze fest. And, you know, my hat's nowhere to be found. But to say, I was something of a Sukuna glazer myself, you know, at least nowadays. And with that being the case, we see that Kashimo is impressed by Sukuna in its perfect form. Gave myself so many cell flashbacks here. But we do get to see that Kashimo does respect Sukuna and his power. And once again, he completes his transformation. The mouth gets fully overwhelmed. He has 3 eyes now. This is this pretty inarguably the most powerful variation of Kashimo we have ever seen. And we see Kashimo lunge in against this beautiful fella right here, and Sukuna stops him dead in his tracks. Dead in his tracks. Oh, this is very, very bad. So here's the thing, right? We see that Sukuna, even when on guard, as long as he gets comboed into by like one of Kashimo's screens or anything like that, or he just gets caught off guard in general, this super fatigued 20-finger Sukuna is able to be tagged by Kashimo. And Kashimo pretty definitively has the speed advantage, as Sukuna never actually hits Phantom Beast Hammer Kashimo while he's in his super fatigued 20-finger state. In fact, he's the only one that gets tagged, knocked around, and beat up. But once we get to here, these hits that were once, you know, bullying, I wouldn't say bullying, but were knocking, well, actually, no. This one, I will admit, getting hit with one right hook and being sent flying this hard into the ground is a little bit embarrassing. But that being the case, where Kashimo showed some sort of relativity, if not outright superiority, to this Sukuna, right? Good stuff, very good stuff, very nice stuff. Dare I say, it's actually a bit scrumdiddlyumptious. All that disappears. Note these motions and these swings that used to do decent damage to Sukuna, well, decent damage as much as a few droplets are, and knocking him back is, there's no motion. And I ain't even talking about the bands one. There is no motion. Kashimo lunges in with 3 separate attacks, and Sukuna just guards them all. Which shows 2 things. In terms of raw reaction speed and combat speed, Sukuna's more than enough to deal with Kashimo. And once again, this is just dealing with him. This is the fight ultimately starting. And also, Sukuna's strength has gotten to the point, or has been restored to the point, depending on whether or not you think it was the injured muscles that caused Sukuna to suddenly leap up to be able to do this, or the restoration of those muscles, and or it's just the fact that he has a better, beefier body than before, and Curse Energy Reinforcement does take into account the physical base. Kashimo is unable to even make Sukuna flinch here. The only thing, and we'll talk about this in a second, and why Sukuna may still kind of have a bit of scaling in terms of something, but maybe not actually, it's going to be weird, is because Sukuna does redirect the electric beam that Kashimo fires here. He doesn't actually want to take a hit by that. He does casually catch Kashimo's knee, he blocks Kashimo's jab, everything else he deals with no problem with his two arms, but he does redirect the electric blast. And we see Kashimo does take a hit here. Now, here's the thing. This may be some little durability scaling. This may be a little bit, because Kashimo doesn't immediately fold. And presumably, if you want to make the argument that Sukuna's taking him full form seriously here, then I guess this is a good feat. But considering what Sukuna implies later on in the chapter, just based on, like how he treats Kashimo and how he kind of talks down to him, it's very unlikely that that is actually Sukuna swinging at full strength. But still, taking a solid 2-arm hit from 20-finger Sukuna is very impressive. And notably, Kashimo, he does seem to take a decent chunk of damage. This could be, once again, with Gege's art style, it's a bit hard to tell. But this could be some juice popping out of him. But we see no juice pop out of his mouth. And while he's knocked back, he immediately does lunge in with a double beam attack, charged with both hands, that he fires forth at Sukuna. So Kashimo does have enough endurance to take hits from Sukuna, and enough durability to not immediately get vaporized by his punches. Whether these punches are serious, questionable. Whether or not Kashimo took much damage from them or not, questionable. But still, that's some pretty decent stuff. At least in terms of Sukuna's likely casual striking force, Kashimo is able to tank that. And considering most characters in the series would instantly atomize from punches from Sukuna, that's pretty good. But once again, Kashimo's attack speed, or lack thereof, gets called into question here. Note, Kashimo fires, presumably, this electromagnetic ray. Electromagnetic rays, which are typically said to fire at the speed of light. And Sukuna only sees this, perceives this, and begins chanting with his belly mouth after the beam is fired, and is starting to travel the distance between these two. But then Sukuna not only manages to chant the entire chant for this spatial dismantle, this spatial slash, if you will, but he also gets to warn Kashimo to dodge the attack. And then the dismantle comes out. All before Kashimo's supposedly light speed attack is able to reach Sukuna. And once again, I need to note, after Sukuna transforms, Kashimo does not hit him again. Every attack gets blocked, redirected, or avoided. As we see, this deadly dismantle does end up taking off Kashimo's hand. We see it fall right here. And notably, this leads to some contention right here. Can Kashimo see Sukuna's slashes? I want to lean towards no. I think this is just a representation for us as the audience, even with him dodging it. He may be like, well, pencil. He very explicitly dodges it here, so he has to be able to see it, right? Sukuna just tells him to evade this, and then he moves out of the way. He moves laterally rather than... He moves sideways. I forgot what is... Laterally is going like sideways in space. What is going forwards and backwards in space? I don't know, forwards and backwards in space. So he kind of just moves to the side, and he still loses his hand. If he could actually see it and would be able to react to this, he would have kept the hand, he would have pulled the entire thing out. But it's very clear, at least to me, that he can't really properly perceive it. And notably, we see his eyes only look to the gaping hole that's left by the slash, not actually looking at the slash itself. So I personally don't believe Kashimo can see them, but as you're going to find out, it doesn't really matter whether or not he can see Cleaver Dismantle. But if you do think he can see them, and he very explicitly reacted to it, and you ignore the warning that Sukuna gave him, then that is some pretty good reaction speed, but it's very clear that Sukuna is once again somewhat holding back against them, even though he's using the spatial slash, because he explicitly warns him to dodge it before the chant's even finished. Which is kind of funny, because it means Sukuna speaks faster than light, but I mean, this is fiction. Light is kind of just a thing that always gets outcrapped, no matter who's using it. So with that being the case, Kashimo dodging this isn't necessarily the best for him because he was warned about it. Like, say hypothetically, I point this at you, and I tell you, hey, I'm going to launch something from this. Move out of the way. And then you move, and then it gets launched, and you still get tagged? Is that really good for you? And sure, like, this space, I'm personally in the camp that the spatial slash does not travel. It just deletes space, and thusly, this would kind of be something that can't be traveled to avoid, so maybe it's more impressive that Kashimo's able to maybe perceive it. I don't know. He still gets tagged by it. He gets warned about it. So I would say, once again, it's kind of hard to argue that Kashimo scales to Sukuna here. And we see Sukuna starts to talk about it, yada, yada, yada. I hate to yada, yada the man, but he does. And we see that Kashimo, I'm not saying he's getting perception blitzed, but, like, he gets struck by Kamutoke, mostly avoids it. I mean, I guess you want to argue that Kashimo may avoid Kamutoke here, but not only are lightning strikes kind of been reacted to before by other characters, but also he does seem to, like, get hit here by his silhouette being struck by Kamutoke, so he couldn't even dodge the lightning, and then Sukuna immediately appears behind him. So once again, in a similar vein to how, ironically enough, I think this is kind of just like a stolen tech from Sukuna, in the same way that Kashimo baited Sukuna into dodging a certain direction by using the electromagnetic beam, which Sukuna dodges here, and then immediately comboing into the screen that causes Sukuna to block and put his direction and attention somewhere else, and then Kashimo lands a hit. Same thing happens here, where Sukuna uses Kamutoke and the lightning strike as a sort of smokescreen, appears behind Kashimo, and immediately goes in for the swing-a-ding, and ends up grabbing Kashimo. So Kashimo does turn enough in time. Sukuna doesn't actually attack him here. But once again, Kashimo's hands get grabbed, and he very explicitly gets redirected again. And then Sukuna double punches his stomach. Admittedly, the three eyes and stuff is weird here, but we do see Kashimo, unlike before, where it seems like he may have taken the double punch. Tanken? I try to fuse taken and tanked into one word, but where he seemed to eat the double punch from Sukuna before here with minimal damage, because we don't know if this is life juice or not. We've seen him come from his mouth. He does take relatively decent damage here. He does cough up some juice. He then gets slammed into the ground, thrown away, and Kashimo dies. So, in terms of scaling to true form Sukuna, I think it's literally impossible. I don't think there's any real way. Not a single one of his attacks land. So in terms of attack and combat speed, I don't think it's possible to argue that the most powerful variation of Kashimo that we've ever seen, a complete mythical beast Amber Kashimo, I think it's pretty much impossible to argue that he scales to true form Sukuna. But he does scale to, at least in my opinion, in its incomplete state, he does scale directly to, if not slightly above, this 20-finger Sukuna. So where does that put him? Kind of weird. Once again, without direct clarification on how weak this Sukuna is, we just know he should be weaker than his full power or half power or quarter power self, considering he can't even use RCT anymore, and he needs to resort to his trump card of incarnating back into his proper form rather than using RCT. So that's good for Kashimo. Kashimo in Mythical Beast Amber did force Sukuna to incarnate. It's likely that Sukuna incarnated in response to the bolt because he didn't want to get hit by it. But after that, it's pretty much impossible. He doesn't land a single hit on True Form. He gets tagged by True Form's attacks that he's very specifically told to avoid, though admittedly the attack may not travel, so that's still pretty impressive for Kashimo. But outside of that, there's nothing that would scale to Sukuna except maybe, this is a weird thing, maybe Sukuna is afraid of the Duraneg that comes from these electrical blasts. Because Sukuna never face tanked these like he face tanks the shouts or any of Kashimo's punches. Notably, you see here that with Kashimo's other attacks, such as his palm strikes or his knee strikes, Sukuna is very willing to block these head on, neutralize all their force, which shows that Sukuna is more dominant physically and has enough speed to react pretty comfortably to Kashimo's attacks. But he always avoids the electrical blast. The electromagnetic rays, he always avoids them. He even avoids them more particularly back when he's in his weaker variation of Sukuna. This one right here, where he dodges the electromagnetic wave specifically, and he dodges the electromagnetic wave here by redirecting, and redirects the electromagnetic wave again when we get to here, and he forces the palm that Kashimo is going to use it with upwards and away from him. So, if anything wanted to be argued for Kashimo scaling the 20-finger Sukuna, you could argue that his hypothetical Duraneg attacks that come from, let me see, where's the Improved agility due to increased activity of electric signals in the brain, sound waves that optimize and attune to natural frequencies of substances, electromagnetic waves that vaporize irradiated objects. So the only thing, in my opinion, that you can make a solid argument just on how Sukuna reacts to them and doesn't want to get hit by them, the only thing you can argue that mystical phantom beast Amber scales to for true form Sukuna is with the electromagnetic waves. He doesn't scale to them in terms of like landing them or their attack speed. They don't seem to scale to Sukuna. Sukuna once again avoids and redirects them at every opportunity. Even one that's literally in the midst of being fired, he kind of just stops midway, chants out a whole thing, and seemingly cleaves it in half before it can even reach him. But in terms of damage, Sukuna very specifically does not want to get hit by them. So with that one Durineg attack, Kashimo could harm Sukuna if you go with the assumption that that's why Sukuna's dodging them, because he was fearful of them. But outside of that, unfortunately, I don't really think it's possible to argue that Kashimo scales to true form Sukuna. So he falls somewhere between the weakest variation of the strongest that we may have ever seen and the strongest variation of the strongest that we may have ever seen. So wherever you think that puts him, that's where he goes. Of course, I have my own thoughts on where Kashimo goes. I'm planning to make a how strong is Kashimo video now that his character is properly cooked and we're getting more and more context for Sukuna and hypothetical opponents that he has. So don't worry, a full comprehensive analysis on where I think Kashimo stands in the rest of the verse is applicable, but this video is mainly just to determine whether or not he scales to the mightiest in Ryomen Sukuna himself. So that's what I think. I personally believe he doesn't scale to Sukuna in his true form, but above, if not relative to 20-finger Omega Fatigue Sukuna. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comment section down below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching once again. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please do me a favor and leave Waffle House. Leave Waffle House in the comment section down below. I'd like to thank you so much for watching once again. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do happen to have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month. Get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You can also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks will include the live reaction to the very next chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That with a Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members, Connor Plays, Redwell 4765, and Greyhound. I'd like to give another thank you to our $5 patrons, Victor, Sean, Midnight Gemlord, Kevin, Demix LND, and Igneal. I'd like to give a thank you to our $7 member, Autumn's Morning Lazo. And I'd like to give another gargantuan thank you to our $10 patrons, Robbie Uchio, Joaquin, Idemokami, and China Doll 09. I'd like to give a thicker than a snicker thank you to our $25 member, Alex Ice Rose. I'd like to give another thicker than a frozen jar of peanut butter thank you to our $25 patron, Calvin Elder.